The UK is facing its largest ever outbreak of avian influenza. DEFRA confirms more than 170 cases in less than 12 months of captive birds. The latest outbreak in Norfolk, Suffolk and parts of Essex has seen the disease at 16 poultry premises. It's a notifiable animal disease, which means you report suspected cases to your local government wildlife agency. For poultry, DEFRA has imposed a mandatory regional housing order. Pheasants are among larger wild birds hit by the disease, alongside corvids and seabirds. What does this mean for shooting?
Most shoots have been inquiring to the NGO in most regions. So the NGO I don't think we've ever been so busy taking calls and giving advice on what to do. So there's a massive desire out there from the gamekeeping sector and shoot owners to get biosecurity in place to protect themselves, if nothing else. So that's really key. I think we need to get the message out there to the guns more, that they're part of this picture, and those people need to take part and be prepared to have clean boots and turn up clean. So if you've got mud on the boots, most disinfectants will struggle to kill the virus. But if the boot's clean, the disinfectants can kill the virus fairly quickly and fairly efficiently, like 99.9%. With mud on boots or on wheel arches on your vehicles, for example, that efficiency will drop dramatically. So everybody's got to do their bit. And if you turn up on a shoot day with your shiny Range Rover, that's great. If you turn up on a shoot day with your muddy Range Rover and you're asked to clean the wheel arches and it's going to be sprayed with disinfectant, we hope you're going to accept that and you're going to say, yes, please, thank you.
I think from the point of view of our sector, the game rearing, game releasing, gamekeeping sector, I think this is possibly, our foot and mouth at this point in time, if we allow it to get out of control, which is why it's important that we take all the steps that we can to stop the spread. It's not as bad yet as something like the foot and mouth outbreak was, and I think we're a long way from that. But if we can all do our bit, we can stop it from reaching that sort of level of concern.
Not everyone in the world of shooting is so gloomy. Ollie Williams runs Cornish Sporting Agency, which lets shoots across the West Country.
We've had issues with other diseases this year. We've had it tested by vets. We had a few birds dying seemingly without explanation, and all that terrible moment of, oh crap, we've got bird flu. Vet tested, it was hexameter, which is a very common, most keepers and shoot owners will know it's a very common disease. We had it quite bad this year because we seem to get it later on than we have had it in the past. So we not when they're out, but just leaving the pens. So we couldn't get that medication into them through the water systems as we normally would. So it was more difficult to target those birds. So as a result, we've had to pull back on a couple of days, as you were saying. But yeah, avian bird flu, whilst it's serious and is a destructive disease in the avian world, I suppose it's not the only one. There are other ones. So biosecurity is always important, irrespective of what the year is doing.
9 avian influenza protection zones and 10 surveillance zones are in place across England and Wales. The National Gamekeepers Organisation says this has no effect on shooting, except to restrict exports of game bird meat from game dealers inside the AIPZs. It's not just pheasant shooters who have to take bird flu seriously.
Currently, there is no regulation, no restriction on the shooting of wild birds. And if we're talking about pigeon control, for example, for crop protection still needs to go ahead. It still needs to carry on. But likewise with deer stalkers, deer stalking, deer management still needs to continue in the countryside. We go back to the biosecurity side of it. If you're going pigeon shooting, don't turn up from being on another estate with mud around your wheel arches and drive onto a different estate. Make sure before you go your vehicle's clean, and that includes your equipment, your hide poles, your decoys, etc, etc. Really simple stuff that doesn't take long, and the same goes for deer stalkers. Clean boots, clean cars, don't bring your dog.
While the National Gamekeepers Organisation want guns banned from bringing gun dogs while bird flu is rife, Others take a more even view of dogs.
Your dog should also be, in effect, clean. Okay. Now, of course, we don't dunk our dogs in disinfectant, but dogs have been flagged as a potential risk due to dirt, okay, and fomites, and DEFRA has specifically flagged them in the risk assessment that they produced at the end of August. I think that risk is incredibly low, but it's not zero again. So if you've been travelling with your dog to areas where there's effective bird flu, don't go to your local shoot for 2 or 3 days, if possible. People who are sort of working locally, thinking locally, staying locally are absolutely fine. But if you're travelling up and down the country, think about whether you need to take your dog with you if you're going to go shooting somewhere else the next day.
After 2 years of COVID and a shortage of birds, bird flu is a tough challenge for gamekeepers and farmers.
It presents game farmers with a very difficult choice as to how are they going to secure their supply lines for next year's production. That's the big difficulty facing game farmers at the moment. Whichever way they turn, the route is fraught with risk. If you overwinter birds, you've got to keep them safe and protected from bird flu all through the winter, which is no easy task and requires a lot of infrastructure and some degree of luck, dare I say. If you catch up, that is a very risky thing to do as well in the middle of an outbreak of bird flu. We also don't know yet whether or not there may be any restrictions placed on catching up. Depending on how bad this outbreak gets, we may see further restrictions than what we've seen in the past. And if you don't do either of those two things, where are the chicks going to come from, or the eggs? Do we rely on French imports? That caused us huge problems this year. So that's a very difficult question, and each game farmer is going to have to look at his own situation and decide which is the least risky option for his situation.
The main vector for bird flu, the main way the disease spreads in the UK, is from migrating birds. Basque says so far the impact of bird flu on wildfowling has been limited, but things are expected to get worse as the colder weather brings the return of migrating wildfowl.
We have a situation where birds migrate very long distances and can potentially carry the virus to and fro, and that's effectively what is happening here, is that effectively the bird flu spread from wider areas, even as far as sort of Asia, through the flyways and byways of sort of Siberia and the north, drop into the UK and deposit the virus on arrival. There's a limit to what we can actually physically do about that. All we can hope for is that effectively immunity will evolve in a domestic species to the current strain, but of course that's until the next strain.
It's a bit of a lottery. Apart from if you win this lottery, you just have a normal year, and if you lose the lottery, you lose a lot of money. But money's not really the issue for most people. It's a case of it's a long winter months without any shooting, which is, as far as I'm concerned, far more distressing.
Basque says shooters should keep up to date with the DEFRA website, and if shoot days are cancelled, stay in touch with shoot organisers so any disruption is minimised.
There's another challenge that's being faced by some gamekeepers, and that's a challenge of after 2 years of COVID, which made everybody had a challenging time. We've now got the largest bird flu outbreak any of us have ever seen. And there is help out there, and sometimes you just need to talk to somebody. Sometimes you need a bit more help. And I would say if you're struggling with anything, with any form of depression or use the word mental illness like an illness, but even if you just need to chat, the Gamekeepers Welfare Trust are out there.
Links for advice and help in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland are in the description below.